Chapter 1. Dust and Disdain. The rain in the foothills of the dragon's spine was a relentless gray curtain clinging to the stone walls of the Crimson Stallion Academy like a jealous lover. It smelled of damp earth, horse sweat, and a quiet, simmering humiliation. I, Jian-Hwa, heir to the Jian Estate and the last practitioner of the ghost step style, was currently scrubbing the mud from my boots in the stable yard, a task I'd chosen myself, a silent penance for a lineage stained with avarice. The academy was a monument to the arrogance of the Zhao dynasty's elite. Built atop a vein of iron rich enough to make a god envious, the Crimson Stallion was more than just a training ground for cavalry. It was a breeding ground for entitlement, a place where young men from noble houses sharpened their egos with every mounted exercise. And I, a man with a history that could shatter empires, was reduced to mucking out stalls, a stain on their pristine world. My days were a precise, agonizing rhythm of cleaning, feeding, and enduring the casual brutality of Commander Kaito, the current star pupil. Kaito, a boy barely 20 summers, radiated a cold, brittle confidence, the kind that clung to him like the oiled leather of his armor. He was from House Lin, a minor branch of the Zhao, known more for its lavish feasts than its strategic prowess. He considered himself a natural warrior, a warrior built on lineage and posturing, and I, with my inherited power and forgotten art, was a grotesque anomaly in his carefully constructed world. This morning, the disdain was particularly potent. Head deliberately splashed mud across my path during drills, forcing me to halt and wipe it from my tunic with a rough burlap cloth. The other students, a gaggle of boisterous, arrogant boys, had snickered. Their laughter carried on the rain like tiny, sharp stones. Kaito, standing before me with a meticulously groomed face and a dismissive tilt of his head, added his own contribution. You call that posture. Jian-Hwa. It resembles a wounded badger more than a warrior. Perhaps you'd be more useful as a glorified rodent. I offered no response, of course. Verbal confrontation was a pointless exercise. I was here to observe, to learn, to wait. My purpose wasn't to challenge Kaito's inflated ego, but to dismantle it. You smell of hay and defeat, he continued, the words dripping with venom. He raised his riding crop, a polished piece of dark wood, and brought it down on my arm with a sharp crack. It wasn't a serious blow, but the sheer audacity of it, the deliberate infliction of pain, was a reminder of my position. A little discipline would hurt, wouldn't you agree? Some are born to ride, and others are born to be ridden. He punctuated his pronouncement with a sneer that aimed to crush my spirit entirely. I allowed him to finish. I felt the sting of the crop, the muscle ache bloom in my arm, but I didn't flinch. My gaze remained fixed on the rain-slicked ground, a silent testament to my control. The ghost step style wasn't about brute strength, it was about precision, about fluidity, about movement so swift it seemed to defy the very laws of physics. It was a legacy entrusted to me by my ancestors, a power suppressed for decades, buried beneath layers of greed and ambition. I was a dormant volcano, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Just then, a softer voice cut through the cacophony. Are you all right, Jian-Hwa? It was Yuna, the stablemaster's daughter. She was a striking figure, lithe and strong, her hands calloused from years of working with the horses. She possessed an unnerving calmness, a quiet observation that seemed to see straight through the superficial. Unlike the other students, she didn't treat me with disdain, but with a hesitant, almost wary respect. She was the closest thing I had to an ally in this suffocating environment. She knelt beside me, carefully applying a cool herbal salve to the throbbing bruise on my arm. The elder's balm is good for these scrapes, she murmured, her fingers surprisingly gentle. It contains willow bark and wintergreen. It will ease the pain and prevent infection. Thank you, Yuna, I replied, my voice deliberately neutral. As she worked, she began to recite a poem, her voice soft and melodic, entirely lost in the background noise of the academy. It was one of the classics, a lament for a lost love, full of poignant imagery and a mournful beauty. I didn't recognize the words, but I felt a strange connection to them, a resonance within my soul. "You have a good ear, Yuna," I said, surprising myself with the genuine compliment. She blushed slightly, tucking a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. I listened to the instructors. They're quite knowledgeable about poetry." I knew she was lying. She wasn't listening to the instructors. She was reciting verses to me, directly. It felt unsettling and profoundly important. She saw something in me, a spirit connection, a latent potential that even I wasn't entirely aware of. The rain continued to fall, washing the mud from my boots and, perhaps, slowly cleansing the bitterness from my heart. As I finished cleaning, I realized something crucial. Kaito didn't just disdain me, he terrified me. Not because of his skill, but because he represented everything that was wrong with the Zhao dynasty, their obsession with status, their relentless pursuit of power, their utter disregard for compassion. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep within my bones, that my time amongst these arrogant young men was not to endure their abuse, but to meticulously dismantle their world. The Rich's ancient heir was about to begin. Chapter 2. Echoes in the Rain. The aftermath of the imperial selection hung thick in the air of the cavalry academy, a strange mixture of stunned reverence and simmering resentment. The murmurs had begun before the Emperor's Guard, a legion of jade-clad warriors, arrived to formally acknowledge Jian-Hwa's intervention. Even the Emperor himself, a man known for his pragmatic detachment, seemed subtly affected, his gaze lingering on the stable hand with an unnerving intensity. Kaito, meanwhile, was a broken statue of entitlement, slumped against a column, his face the color of bruised plum. The other students, initially buzzing with competitive fervor, now regarded Jian-Hwa with a wary respect, a quiet acknowledgement of the impossible. I retreated to the stables, seeking the familiar comfort of the horses and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. My task wasn't to bask in the attention, it was to observe, to understand. The guard had been exceptionally courteous, offering silks and a small stipend, but their gestures felt clumsy, almost apologetic. They were acknowledging a force they didn't comprehend, a power that bypassed their rigid training and their ingrained social hierarchy. Yuna found me a short while later, a small basket in her hand, overflowing with freshly picked herbs, chamomile, lavender, and a pungent root she identified as dragon's breath. "I thought you might need this," she said, her voice hesitant, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. The healers in the village suggested it for bruises, and perhaps a little something to calm your nerves. As I gratefully accepted the basket, I noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. The quiet observation, the almost tentative reverence, seemed to deepen. It wasn't simply pity, it was a genuine curiosity, a desire to decipher something just beyond her grasp. "You were remarkable," she said, the words surprisingly direct. Most wouldn't have reacted like that, especially not a stable hand. I met her gaze, a flicker of amusement in my eyes. "It's a strange thing, Yuna. Some people are more attuned to certain energies than others. The world is full of echoes, you see, and sometimes they resonate with unexpected strength." I carefully began grinding the dragon's breath into a poultice, the scent filling the small space. It's about understanding where the vibration comes from, finding the point of pressure to release it. As I worked, I continued to analyze Kaito. He hadn't moved. He hadn't uttered a word. He simply stared, his expression a mask of bewildered rage. The other students, emboldened by my actions, began to circle him, whispering accusations and taunts. "Coward!" one shouted. "A lucky fluke!" cried another. Kaito, predictably, responded with a snarl, attempting to regain some semblance of authority, But his voice lacked conviction, stripped bare by his failure. Suddenly the rain intensified, a torrential downpour that hammered against the clay walls of the stables. The water streamed down in blinding sheets, washing away the mud and the remnants of the earlier chaos. As the rain intensified, I felt it, a subtle shift within myself, a rising awareness of the flow around me. It was as though the water itself was responding to my movements, guiding my actions, amplifying my power. The ghost step style wasn't simply a martial art. It was a communion with the very essence of motion, a way to become one with the currents of the universe. I instinctively reached out, extending my hand towards the downpour. To my surprise, the raindrops didn't merely fall past me, they swirled around my hand, creating a miniature vortex. I moved my fingers, and the water followed, forming intricate patterns, a shimmering display of controlled chaos. Yuna gasped, her eyes wide with astonishment. You can control the rain? I didn't explain, didn't try to articulate the complex mechanics of the ghost step style. Instead, I simply said it's about finding the rhythm, Yuna. Just like the horses. Just like the water. Just like everything. As the rain lessened, a new sound reached my ears, the distinct chime of approaching footsteps. It was the guard, returning to escort me. But this time, their demeanor was markedly different. Their eyes held a quiet respect, and their movements were deliberate, almost reverent. As I turned to face them, I noticed a faint smile playing on the lips of the captain, a grizzled veteran who had served the emperor for decades. The rumors are true. Stable hand, he said, his voice low and measured. You are a ghost warrior, a relic of a forgotten age. He then turned to Yuna. You have a keen eye, young one. You understand what others do not. Before I could respond, he presented me with a small, intricately carved jade pendant, a stylized dragon coiled around a sword. A token of gratitude, he said, and a reminder. The Empire owes you a debt it can never repay. With a final bow, the guard departed, leaving me standing with Yuna in the now damp stables. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with the realization that my arrival had not merely disrupted the Jade dynasty, it had irrevocably altered its trajectory. The Emperor wants to speak with you, Yuna said quietly, holding out the jade pendant. He wishes to understand what you can do. I took the pendant, feeling its cool smoothness against my skin. I looked at Yuna, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The reckoning had begun, and I knew with a chilling certainty that the arrogant elite of the Jade dynasty were about to learn a very painful lesson. The rich's ancient heir had arrived, and the world was about to be reshaped. Chapter 3. The Emperor's Inquiry. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell with a relentless drumming insistence, mirroring the sudden, insistent pulse in my own veins. The guard's departure had been swift, efficient, almost unnervingly polite for men who had just witnessed a slaughter. The captain's words echoed in my ears, a ghost warrior, a relic of a forgotten age. It was a description that simultaneously thrilled and terrified me. The ghost step style wasn't just a martial art, it was a lineage, a whisper of power lost to the ages, deliberately concealed by my ancestors. Yuna, ever observant, offered a small, reassuring gesture, wiping a smudge of mud from my tunic with a practiced movement. It's strange, isn't it? She murmured, her eyes fixed on the jade pendant. The Emperor seeking a stable hand. It's unheard of. We made our way through the echoing corridors of the academy, the slick stone floor amplifying the rhythmic patter of the rain. The guards, remnants of Kaito's cohort, regarded us with a mixture of apprehension and grudging respect, a palpable shift in atmosphere that spoke volumes. Kaito, predictably, was absent, his shadow a palpable absence of arrogance. The Emperor's audience chamber was vast, a cavern of polished jade and intricately carved dragon motifs. It felt less like a throne room and more like a temple, imbued with the weight of centuries. 4 imperial guards, clad in burnished bronze armor, stood sentinel, their faces impassive, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords. The emperor, Zhao Long, sat upon his dragon throne, a figure of imposing majesty even in his age. He was a man etched with the burdens of leadership, his face a tapestry of wrinkles that spoke of countless decisions and sleepless nights. He gestured for us to approach, a single, precise movement. "Stable hand Jian-Hwa," he stated, his voice resonant and carrying a subtle authority. "Your performance at the Imperial selection was most remarkable. The reports I've received have been, frankly, astounding." He paused, his gaze sweeping over me, assessing, probing. "The legends surrounding the Jian Estate speak of warriors who moved like the wind, who could vanish in the blink of an eye. I confess, I believed them to be mere tales." He steepled his fingers, considering me. "The truth, it seems, is far more extraordinary. Your ability to neutralize the Ronin with such speed and precision, it defies comprehension. The whispers have reached my ears, whispers of the ghost step style. Tell me, Jian-Hwa, what is it that you truly are?" I held up the jade pendant, the dragon's eye gleaming in the torchlight. "I am the heir to the Jian Estate," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor of anticipation within me. "And I am the last practitioner of the ghost step style. It is a martial art that emphasizes fluidity, evasion, and precise, debilitating strikes. It was deliberately concealed generations ago, after a period of instability within our clan. The goal was to protect it, not to expose its full potential." A flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps apprehension, crossed the emperor's face. "A shame," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Such power, hidden away." He then turned to Yuna, acknowledging her presence. "You have been observant, young one. You've recognized a spirit connection where others saw only a stable hand." He gestured to a eunuch who presented a bowl of crystal-clear tea. "Let us discuss the potential of this gift. The Jade dynasty has long been a pillar of stability, but we are constantly threatened by internal dissent, by ambitious neighbors, by forces we cannot even comprehend. The ghost steps stylite could be a vital asset." I began to explain the core principles of the style, the concept of ripple flow, the redirection of force, the utilization of the environment for concealment. As I spoke, I felt a subtle shift within me, a resonance between my words and the ancient techniques that flowed through my veins. The rain outside seemed to intensify, as if responding to the release of power. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the chamber. Not a violent shake, but a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very stone beneath our feet. The Imperial guards instinctively raised their weapons, their movements precise and practiced. The Emperor, however, remained impassive, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Interesting," he said, his eyes narrowed. "It seems the ghost step style is not merely a martial art. It is a key." He gestured to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a small alcove filled with ancient scrolls and artifacts. For centuries, the Jian Estate has guarded more than just martial prowess. You are a guardian of something far older, far more profound, something connected to the very foundation of this empire. As I stepped towards the alcove, a chilling realization washed over me. The debt the empire owed me wasn't simply about the land or the jade mines. It was about a secret, a responsibility, a destiny far grander and more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The reckoning had truly begun, and I was about to unravel a legacy that could shatter the Jade dynasty, or, perhaps, save it. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Serpent. The alcove pulsed with a faint, almost palpable energy. The scrolls weren't bound in leather, but a dark woven material that seemed to shift and writhe under my gaze. Artifacts lay nestled within a jade serpent coiled around a bone flute, a rusted bronze mirror etched with serpentine patterns, and a small obsidian talisman shaped like a closed eye. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of rain and something older, something akin to the primordial earth. The Emperor Zhao, observed me with unnerving stillness. He wasn't exhibiting fear, but a profound, unsettling curiosity. The ghost step style, he continued, his voice a low rumble, is a reflection, not just of a martial art, but of a binding. The Jian Estate for generations has been the anchor for our resonance, a connection to the serpent's breath. He gestured to the jade serpent. Legend tells of the first emperor, Jian-Hwa, not through conquest alone, but through a pact. He faced a chaos born of raw, untamed energy, a serpent of pure destruction, capable of unraveling the very fabric of existence. He didn't fight it with steel, but with a martial art designed to harness and redirect that energy, to create a serpent's coil of protection around the empire. The obsidian talisman suddenly warmed in my hand, radiating a subtle thrum. As I instinctively closed my fingers around it, a flood of images erupted in my mind, flashes of warriors clad in jade armor, battling monstrous serpentine entities beneath a crimson sky. I saw Jian-Hwa, my ancestor, not as a mere warlord, but a conduit, channeling the serpent's breath with terrifying grace. The ghost step style isn't simply about moving through rain, the Emperor said, interrupting my disorientation. It's about channeling that original force. Each step, each strike, echoes the movements of the serpent's breath. It's a form of containment, a way to maintain the balance. He paused, his gaze sharpening. For centuries, the estate has been entrusted with this knowledge, with the responsibility of suppressing the serpent's breath when it threatens to surface. He picked up the bronze mirror, examining the serpentine carvings. The mirror isn't for vanity, Jian-Hwa thought it. It's a focus, a way to amplify the resonance. It allows you to perceive the flow of energy, to sense the potential breaches. When I spoke of a debt, I spoke of a power that, if unchecked, would consume this empire. A guard, a stoic man named Li Wei, approached with a scroll. Your Majesty, the seismographs are still registering fluctuations. Minor, but persistent. They correlate with your demonstration, Your Grace. The Emperor nodded. Indeed. The ghost step style doesn't just move the body, it moves the earth itself. And it appears, despite our best efforts, the serpent's breath remains active. He turned back to me, his expression grave. The Ronin, they weren't merely assassins. They were drawn to a surge of this energy, a weakness in the protective coil. Someone was deliberately disrupting the balance. My mind raced. Kaito, driven by pride and ambition, had sought to exploit this weakness. But who else knew? Who else could manipulate the serpent's breath? Suddenly, Yuna's voice, soft but firm, cut through the tension. Jian-Hwa, she said, approaching cautiously. The herbs I gave you there reacting. The bruises are fading not just through your own strength, but faster. The jade in my family's mindset pulses with a similar energy. The Emperor's eyes widened. The family's land, it's a locus, a point where the serpent's breath concentrates. It seems the Jian Estate's role is far more complex than I initially believed. He turned to me, his voice low and urgent. You are not simply the last practitioner of the ghost step style. You are the key to both containing and wielding the serpent's breath. And, perhaps, the key to unlocking a power that could either save or destroy the Zhao dynasty. He gestured to the alcove again. Begin by studying these scrolls. Understand the techniques, the rituals, the balance. The serpent's breath is a dangerous force, a reflection of chaos. But within it lies a potent strength, a potential for unparalleled power. Your training will not be merely in combat, Jian-Hwa. It will be in the art of harmony. As I reached for the nearest scroll, a sharp crystalline voice echoed through the chamber, seemingly emanating from the obsidian talisman in my hand. The serpent stirs. The echo grows louder. The price of silence is oblivion. I instinctively raised my hand, clenching the talisman. The tremor intensified, and I felt a surge of raw, overwhelming power coursing through my veins, a power that resonated with the very heart of the empire, and with the ancient, terrifying promise of the serpent's breath. The reckoning had truly begun, and the ghosts of my ancestors were whispering on the wind. Chapter 5. Echoes of the Serpent. The scrolls lay scattered before me, a chaotic testament to centuries of forgotten knowledge. The air in the Emperor's private study thickened, heavy with incense and a palpable sense of dread. The obsidian talisman, cool against my palm, pulsed with a faint rhythmic throb, mirroring the unsettling resonance building within me. The tremor, triggered by the talisman's pronouncements, was becoming a constant companion, a low-level hum beneath my skin. The Emperor, a man named Jian-Hwa, was a study in controlled intensity. His face, etched with the burdens of governance, remained impassive, but his eyes, the color of polished jade, held a disconcerting weight of awareness. He watched me with an unsettlingly detached curiosity, as if observing a specimen under a magnifying glass. "The ghost step style," he began, his voice measured, "is but a vessel, Jian-Hwa, a honed expression of something far older, far more primal. The scrolls speak of the Weaver's warriors who didn't simply move through the world, but shaped it with their breath, with their very being." He unfurled a scroll depicting a series of intricate hand gestures, each accompanied by stylized calligraphy. These are not mere fighting techniques. They are meditations, rituals designed to coax the energy from the earth, to resonate with the spirit of the land. He pointed to a particularly complex sequence. This, the stone resonance, allows the practitioner to manipulate the density of their own body, to become as light as a feather or as solid as granite. It's said that the first weavers could even induce tremors in the earth. I tentatively reached out, mirroring the gestures. As my fingers traced the faded ink, a jolt, sharper than before, surged through me. The room shifted subtly, the scent of sandalwood intensified, the shadows deepened, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a strange disconnect, as if my consciousness was momentarily separated from my physical form. It was a dizzying experience, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "The serpent's breath," Jian-Hwa continued, his voice gaining a note of urgency, "is the source of that power. It is the raw, untamed essence of creation and destruction, trapped within the jade mines. For generations, the Jian Estate has acted as a barrier, a carefully constructed cage designed to contain its influence. Your family's lineage isn't merely about iron and jade, it's about guarding a fundamental truth, that the universe is not ordered, but inherently chaotic, and that true power lies not in conquering chaos, but in understanding." He gestured towards a massive, intricately carved jade statue dominating one corner of the room. It depicted a coiled serpent, its scales shimmering with an unnatural luminescence, its eyes seemingly filled with an ancient wisdom. This statue, known as the dragon's maw, is a focal point for the serpent's breath. It amplifies its power, and correspondingly, amplifies the responsibility you carry. Suddenly, the talisman in my hand flared with blinding light, throwing grotesque shadows across the room. The tremor intensified, building to a near unbearable crescendo. The carvings on the dragon's maw seemed to writhe and shift, and a low, guttural murmur filled the air, a chorus of voices, ancient and terrifying. "Silence," Jian-Hwa commanded, his voice booming with unexpected authority. "Control yourself, Jian-Hwa. You are beginning to feed the beast." I fought to regain control, clutching the talisman, focusing on the imagery of the scrolls, the flowing movements, the deliberate breaths. The tremors slowly subsided, but the resonance lingered, a palpable vibration within my core. "The scrolls also speak of echoes," Jian-Hwa explained, his brow furrowed. "Fragments of past weavers, imprinted onto the jade, onto the land, waiting to be awakened. The talisman is a conduit, a way to access these echoes, to learn from their mistakes, to harness their power." He produced a small, intricately carved bone flute from beneath his robes. This is a resonance flute. When played with intention, it can amplify the echoes, allowing you to experience the memories of the weavers firsthand. But be warned, Jian-Hwa. The past is not always benevolent. Some echoes will seek to corrupt, to consume you. As he began to play, a haunting melody filled the room, a mournful, almost desperate tune that seemed to seep into my bones. The air shimmered, and before me, a translucent image materialized, a warrior clad in ancient armor, wielding a lead rope with breathtaking speed and precision. He was performing the same 5 strikes that I had witnessed Kaito employ during the Imperial selection, only this version was imbued with a terrifying grace, a lethal efficiency. I instinctively mirrored his movements, attempting to replicate the pressure point strikes. As I did, another image flickered into existence, a younger version of myself, standing within the stables, wielding the very lead rope that was my defense. It was a horrifying realization. The ghost step style wasn't merely a technique, it was a lineage, a connection to countless warriors who had lived and died guarding the serpent's breath. The music abruptly ceased, and the echoes vanished. The talisman fell silent. I stood there, drenched in sweat, my body trembling with the weight of this newfound knowledge. The serpent's breath is awakening in you, Jian-Hwa. Zhao said, his voice grave. Your training begins now, and I suspect it will be a long and perilous one. Chapter 6. Echoes of the serpent's breath. The scent of sandalwood and damp stone clung to the air in Zhao Wei's chambers, a scent layered with the unspoken weight of centuries. The room itself was a study, crammed with scrolls, weathered maps depicting the forgotten routes of the Silk Road, and strange instruments, a suspended orrery charting the movements of the stars, a collection of polished stones humming with faint energies. It was a space dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of the Jian Estate, and today, it felt particularly charged with a sense of impending doom. I shifted uneasily, the residual tremor from the echo's revelation still coursing through me. The image of the warrior, the lead rope, a weapon of impossible speed, was burned into my mind. Zhao Wei, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the burdens of knowledge, observed me with an unnerving intensity. He hadn't spoken since the resonance flute had fallen silent, simply watched, a single eyebrow arched in contemplation. The ghost step style, he finally said, his voice a low rumble, is far more than a martial art, Jian-Hwa. It's a tether. A living thread woven through generations of warriors, each honing their skill, each seeking to preserve the serpent's breath. Wow! He gestured towards a large, circular tapestry dominating the far wall. It depicted a coiled serpent, shimmering with an unnatural emerald light, rising from a sea of swirling clouds. The serpent's breath is not a physical weapon, though it manifests in incredible speed and agility. It's the distilled essence of countless lifetimes dedicated to protecting this land, to warding off threats both seen and unseen. But the echoes, I stammered, still grappling with the revelation. The images, they were so raw, so deadly. The echoes aren't simply recordings, Jian-Hwa, Zhao Wei explained, pacing slowly. They're resonances, the residual energy of battles fought, of spirits consumed, of potential corrupted. The weavers, as they were called, were tasked with maintaining a delicate balance, channeling the serpent's breath while guarding against its misuse. The flute and the talisman it contained were their instruments. It allowed them to briefly solidify the echoes, making them accessible, but also incredibly volatile. He stopped, his gaze piercing. Your lineage is unusually sensitive to this energy. The connection is stronger than any other Jian heir in centuries. It's a double-edged sword. It grants you unimaginable power, but it also makes you profoundly vulnerable to the darkness that clings to the echoes. He produced a small, intricately carved jade pendant, a miniature replica of the resonance flute. This will help you focus. It will dampen the intrusive echoes, allowing you to access your training in a controlled manner. But understand this, Jian-Hwa, the serpent will not be tamed. It will demand your attention, your discipline, and, ultimately, your loyalty. He began to demonstrate a series of movements, fluid and precise, his body seeming to flow with an almost unnatural grace. He wasn't wielding a weapon, but his movements suggested a deadly potency. I instinctively mirrored him, attempting to replicate his stance, the feel of the movements, but the echoes still tugged at the edges of my awareness. Brief flashes of combat, of desperate struggles, flickered behind my eyelids, the ghostly image of the lead rope, a constant, unsettling presence. "The key is control," Jiao said, his voice firm. "You must learn to compartmentalize the echoes, to view them as tools rather than distractions. Visualize the serpent's breath, not as a force of raw aggression, but as a protective shield." Suddenly, a new image bloomed within my mind, far more jarring and chaotic than the previous echoes. This time, I wasn't just witnessing a battle, I felt it, the icy fear, the desperate adrenaline, the bone-crushing impact of a blow. I saw myself, younger, more reckless, wielding the lead rope with untrained fury, unleashing a torrent of devastating strikes. And then, superimposed over my younger self, was a second, malevolent image, a warrior, clad in blackened armor, his face obscured by a helmet, channeling the serpent's breath with a chilling, predatory grace. I gasped, stumbling backwards, clutching my head. "It's corrupting," I cried, struggling to maintain control. Jiao swiftly produced a small vial filled with a shimmering opalescent liquid. "Consume this," he commanded, pressing the vial into my hand. "It's a binding agent, distilled from rare mountain herbs. It will briefly anchor you to the present, suppressing the echoes until you can regain control." As the liquid slid down my throat, a wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a chilling clarity. The echoes receded, momentarily silenced. But as I looked up, I realized Jiao was no longer observing me with concern. His face was grim, a subtle shift in his demeanor indicating he wasn't studying my control, but rather assessing the depth of the corruption that now resided within me. "The serpent's breath," he murmured, his voice laced with something akin to dread, "has chosen its champion." Chapter 7. The serpent's breath, the opalescent liquid, had done its job, but the silence it had bought was a deceptive one. The echoes hadn't vanished entirely. They now existed as a low thrum beneath my skin, a persistent, unsettling vibration. And Jiao observation, his quiet, measured dread hung heavier in the air than the scent of damp earth and horse sweat. "Explain," I demanded, my voice strained, the effort of containing the surging power within me a physical ache. "Explain what you mean by chosen." Jiao didn't answer immediately. He circled me slowly, his eyes, normally a calm, steady gray, flickered with an unsettling intensity. He was a scholar, a master of ancient techniques, yet he moved with the deliberate menace of a predator. Finally, he stopped, his gaze fixed on the intricate knotwork of the lead rope I still held, a relic of the horrifying display at the Imperial Selection. "The ghost step style," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "is far more than just rapid movement. It's a conduit. For centuries, it was taught in fragmented whispers, passed down through families bound to the spirit of the land. But it's a style that fundamentally resists external influence. The serpent's breath, it's a martial technique, an ancient art of manipulation that seeks such conduits. It whispers promises of amplified power, of absolute control. It preys upon the vulnerable, the disillusioned, those with a strong will, a latent talent, and a yearning for something beyond the mundane." He gestured towards the lead rope. "You, Jian-Hwa, were not merely an heir to the Jian Estate. You were a living vessel, unknowingly brimming with the potential to become something extraordinary. The serpent's breath didn't awaken your ghost step style. It infected it. It amplified the raw power, transforming it into something darker. A shudder ran through me. It was a chilling recognition, a terrifying understanding of what had happened in the arena. The lightning-fast strikes weren't simply the culmination of years of training, they were the violent assertion of a will entirely alien to my own. But why? I whispered, the question tasting like ash in my mouth. The Ronin, Jian-Hwa said, his gaze unwavering, were pawns. Skilled, dangerous pawns, yes, but merely instruments in a far more complex game. The serpent's breath doesn't seek assassination for its own sake. It seeks to destabilize, to disrupt, to sow chaos. The Emperor's Guard, the very foundations of the Empire, are vulnerable to such influence. And the whispers of the serpent's breath travel swiftly, through willing minds, through forgotten lineages, through echoes. He took a step closer, his hand hovering near the hilt of his sword. The echoes you've been experiencing are not merely memories, Jian-Hwa. They are fragments of the warrior who now possesses a portion of your soul. A warrior who is driven by a singular, consuming desire dominion. Suddenly, a new image slammed into my consciousness. Sharper, more visceral than before. This time, I wasn't just a passive observer, I was him. The armor, the helmet, the chillingly precise movements, the cold, calculated ruthlessness. I felt the serpent's breath, a suffocating wave of energy that burned through my veins, twisting my thoughts, amplifying my anger, demanding action. I staggered, clutching my head, fighting against the overwhelming intrusion. I can't control it. Jian-Hwa's expression shifted, no longer laced with mere dread, but with a grim determination. He moved with a speed that belied his age, producing a second vial, this one filled with a viscous crimson liquid. This, he said, his voice urgent, is Dragon's Tear. It's a counteragent, a potent catalyst designed to suppress the serpent's breath's influence and force a temporary severance. It is volatile, but it's our only chance. As I drank the crimson liquid, the familiar wave of nausea returned, intensified tenfold. This time, however, it was accompanied by a searing pain, a feeling of my very being torn apart and reassembled. The echoes intensified, coalescing into a single, overwhelming presence, the warrior, a phantom of immense power, demanding to be unleashed. Then, just as abruptly as it began, it ceased. The pain vanished, the echoes faded, and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. When I opened my eyes, Jian-Hwa was kneeling beside me, his face etched with concern. "The severance is complete," he said, his voice strained. "For now. But the serpent's breath is not defeated. It merely sleeps." He looked at the lead rope, now lying discarded on the floor. "This rope," he said, his voice low, "is no longer merely a tool of your ghost step style. It's a key. And someone, somewhere, is trying to unlock the door." Chapter 8. Echoes of the Serpent. The rain in the courtyard of the Jian Estate wasn't a gentle caress. It was a relentless, icy assault, mimicking the tremors that still pulsed beneath my skin. The crimson stain on the flagstones, a lingering ghost of the Dragon's Tear, served as a grim reminder of the precarious balance Jian-Hwa and I had managed to achieve. He remained a watchful presence, meticulously documenting the fluctuations in my energy, his face a mask of grim understanding. "The severance was imperfect," he stated finally, his tone devoid of reassurance. "The serpent's breath is a tenacious spirit, clinging to the edges of your being. It's not gone, Jian-Hwa. It's merely dormant, feeding on the residual echoes of your ghost step training." I rose cautiously, the movement stiff and unfamiliar, like a puppet with newly discovered strings. The experience had stripped away a layer of my composure. leaving me acutely aware of the raw, untamed power simmering within. The lead rope, now resting on a small wooden table, seemed to thrum with a dark energy. It was no longer just a tool, it was an anchor, a conduit, a key to something ancient and profoundly dangerous. "What do you sense?" I asked, my voice a low rasp. "What are these echoes?" Jian-Hwa consulted his meticulously crafted scrolls, his brow furrowed in concentration. The ghost step style, Jian-Hwa, isn't simply martial arts. It's a connection to the very flow of time, a mastery of movement that bends space itself. When you utilize it, you imprint your essence, your will, onto the fabric of reality. The serpent's breath, it thrives on those imprints. It's the residual energy of countless ghost step practitioners, a chaotic torrent of movement seeking to reclaim its dominion. He pointed to a complex diagram illustrating swirling currents, each labeled with a different era and a warrior's name. A nameless warrior from the Three Kingdoms, a scholar who'd mastered the art during the Tang dynasty, even whispers of a forgotten guardian from the first dynasties. "This is a resonance map," he explained. "The serpent's breath is drawing on these echoes, amplifying them, feeding its potential. And the more you use the ghost step style, the stronger it becomes." Suddenly, a wave of dizziness slammed into me, sharper than any before. The air around the table shimmered, and I glimpsed fleeting images, a warrior in flowing robes, executing impossibly rapid movements. A desolate battlefield drenched in rain, a flash of white lightning. It wasn't just an echo, it felt like a memory, a fragment of a life lived centuries ago. I clutched my head, fighting to maintain control. "It's returning," I gasped. The warrior Hez trying to manifest. Jian-Hwa reacted with instinctive speed, producing a small, polished jade pendant, a stylized serpent coiled around a blooming lotus flower. "The lotus ward," he said, holding it aloft. "It's designed to disrupt these resonance patterns, to dampen the influence of the serpent's breath. But it's only a temporary measure." As he chanted in ancient Shanghainese, a faint, luminous green glow emanated from the pendant. The swirling currents around the lead rope seemed to momentarily subside, and the chaotic echoes receded. But then, a voice, cold and ancient, resonated within my mind. "Freedom." I staggered back, the lead rope snapping from my grip and rolling across the floor. As it did, the courtyard transformed. The rain intensified, swirling around us in a miniature vortex, and the meticulously manicured gardens began to warp and twist, reflecting a landscape of decaying stone and shattered bone. It wasn't just a visual illusion, I could feel the shift in time, the echoes of battles fought and lost, the weight of centuries pressing down upon me. "The door is opening," Jian-Hwa shouted, his voice barely audible above the roar of the rain. "The warrior is attempting to break through." And then I saw him. A figure coalesced from the mist, tall and impossibly graceful, clad in ancient, tattered armor. He moved with a terrifying fluidity, his movements blurring into the storm, his eyes burning with an unnerving intensity. It was the warrior from the echoes, a ghost step practitioner, wielding a lead rope like a weapon, his very presence radiating an aura of devastating power. "Hez feeding on your energy," I realized, understanding dawning with terrifying clarity. The serpent's breath isn't just controlling him, it's using him. He advanced on me, a silent, deadly whirlwind. This time, I didn't falter. The pain, the nausea, the chaos, it all coalesced into a singular focus, a surge of will that channeled through the lead rope. It wasn't the controlled ghost step I'd learned, it was something raw, untamed, driven by the ancient warrior's desperation. "You will not control me," I roared, unleashing a torrent of force that slammed into the phantom warrior, shattering his form into 1,000 glittering fragments. But even as he dissipated, I knew, with chilling certainty, that he hadn't been defeated. Head simply shifted, waiting for the next echo, the next opportunity to reclaim his dominion. The serpent's breath was far from silenced. Chapter 9. Echoes in the jade. The rain hammered against the tiled roofs of the Jian Estate, a relentless drumming reminder of the forces we were battling. The dismantling of the Serpent's Breath outpost in the western mines had been brutal, swift, and utterly terrifying. We'd lost Master Lin, a sacrifice I would forgive myself for. Now, I found myself slumped against a jade pillar in the estate's courtyard, the cool smoothness a meager comfort against the burning ache in my muscles and the deeper, colder ache in my soul. Yuna found me there, her face etched with concern. She carried a small porcelain cup filled with a dark, fragrant tea, one of her more potent herbal concoctions, intended to soothe the lingering tremors. "Wah," she said, her voice soft. "You haven't moved in hours. Tell me what you saw." I took a slow sip of the tea, the bitterness momentarily grounding me. It wasn't just a phantom, Yuna. It was a fragment, a tether to a past so ancient, so potent, it threatened to unravel everything. The warrior he wasn't simply a weapon. He was a consciousness, trapped, fragmented, desperately trying to reassemble itself through me. I recounted the confrontation, the horrifying clarity with which I'd understood the Serpent's Breath's insidious influence, the way they'd manipulated the warrior's movements, amplifying his pain, feeding on his rage, twisting him into an instrument of destruction. It was a chilling revelation not just that the ghost step style was a conduit for immense power, but that it could also be a trap, a prison for spirits long dead. "The lead rope," I continued, tracing the worn leather with my fingers. "It wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, a focal point for his residual energy. The Serpent's Breath had been attempting to bind him to this era, to use his skill and fury to further their agenda." Suddenly, a sharp report echoed across the courtyard. A young stable boy, Li Wei, rushed towards us, his face pale with urgency. "Sir, Commander Kaito. He's been found near the west gate. He was dismantled." The words hit me like a physical blow. Dismantled. The term carried a brutal weight, implying not just incapacitation, but utter destruction of the body and spirit. I rose to my feet, a cold fury replacing the exhaustion. Kaito, the arrogant, entitled boy who had treated me with such contempt, who had reveled in my degradation. He thought he could define me, reduce me to a tool. "Bring him here," I commanded, my voice tight with controlled rage. Within moments, Kaito was brought before me, a crumpled mess of torn silks and broken bones, his face a mask of bewildered pain. The guards restrained him, fearful of his reaction. He attempted to speak, but only a choked groan escaped his lips. As I approached, I felt it, a faint echo of the warrior's presence, a residual energy clinging to the boy's ravaged form. It was weaker now, suppressed, but undeniably there. The Serpent's Breath hadn't simply killed Kaito, it had absorbed his spirit, twisting it into a grotesque parody of its former self. "You were a distraction," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "A means to an end. You believed you were a warrior. You were nothing more than a vessel." I reached for the lead rope, not to strike, but to touch. As my fingers made contact, a surge of energy pulsed through me, intensifying the echoes within Kaito's body. He convulsed violently, a silent scream trapped within his shattered consciousness. Then, something unexpected happened. The fragmented warrior within Kaito, a brief, desperate flicker, reached out, not with aggression but with a profound sadness. I saw, in that fleeting moment, a warrior ravaged by centuries of battle, his spirit broken, his purpose lost. I instinctively recoiled, severing the connection. The convulsion ceased, and Kaito slumped unconscious, utterly drained. Yuna, who had watched the entire exchange with a quiet intensity, rushed forward, and gently cleansed his wounds with her herbal salve. "He was trapped," she whispered, her voice filled with a surprising empathy, like a bird caught in a snare. I looked at her, at the compassionate understanding in her eyes, and a flicker of something akin to hope ignited within me. Perhaps, I thought, this wasn't just about revenge. Perhaps it was about understanding the echoes of the past, about confronting the darkness that threatened to consume us all. "The serpent's breath is still out there," I said, my gaze sweeping across the rain-swept courtyard. "It feeds on discord, on pain, on the remnants of forgotten warriors. We haven't won. And as the rain continued to fall, I knew that the reckoning had only just begun. The warrior's echo might be silenced, but the ghosts of the past, and the forces seeking to unleash them, remained. Chapter 10. The Jades whisper the immediate aftermath of the Imperial selection was a whirlwind of orchestrated chaos. The Emperor, a man renowned for his icy pragmatism, had been utterly captivated by Jian-Hwa's display. He declared the stable hand a national hero, a living testament to the Empire's martial prowess, and immediately bestowed upon him the title of Guardian of the West. The irony was not lost on Jian-Hwa, who accepted the honor with a solemn nod, a small, almost imperceptible flicker of amusement in his eyes. Kaito, meanwhile, was a pathetic figure. Stripped of his rank, his house's prestige, and any semblance of dignity, he was relegated to cleaning the stables, his once pristine armor now dusted with manure, the arrogant swagger replaced by sullen resentment. He avoided eye contact with everyone, including the stable boys, and spent his days meticulously polishing the horseshoes of the lower-ranking officers, a task he performed with a venomous quietness. The academy, now rightfully owned by the Jian Estate, underwent a radical transformation. The opulent training grounds were subtly altered, focusing not on flashy displays of power, but on disciplined, tactical drills. Jian-Hwa, with Yuna's quiet guidance, implemented a curriculum designed to hone not just physical prowess, but also strategic thinking and understanding of ancient battle formations, lessons gleaned from centuries of ghost-step combat. He even established a small, discreet library, filled with scrolls detailing forgotten martial techniques and the history of the warrior ghosts he was destined to join. But the shift in power was more than just the physical restructuring of the academy. It was a subtle, pervasive change in the atmosphere. The heavy-handed authority of the noble houses, built on intimidation and displays of wealth, began to crumble under Jian-Hwa's quiet strength. He didn't seek to dominate, he sought to rectify, to gently nudge the empire towards a more just and harmonious future. It was during one of these training sessions, a particularly grueling drill focused on defensive maneuvers, that I began to understand the true nature of the serpent's breath. As we practiced forming a protective circle, I felt it a cold, insistent pressure on my mind, a whisper of bitterness and rage. It was fainter than before, weakened by Kaito's disruption, but undeniably present. "Focus, Jian-Hwa," Yuna instructed, her voice calm and measured. "Feel the flow of energy. Don't resist. Channel it." I closed my eyes, attempting to center myself, to draw upon the familiar rhythm of the ghost step. But the serpent's breath was relentless, attempting to drag me into a spiral of pain and despair, feeding on the lingering echoes of Kaito's anguish. Suddenly, I saw a flash, a fragmented image of a battlefield, drenched in blood, warriors locked in a desperate, hopeless struggle against an unseen enemy. It wasn't a battle from my time, but it resonated with a primal understanding of suffering. As the vision faded, I realized that the serpent's breath wasn't simply a malevolent entity, it was a psychic residue, a concentration of negative energy left behind by countless fallen warriors, trapped between worlds, forever yearning for release. Kaito's violent convulsions hadn't been an accident. He had inadvertently become a conduit, a focal point for this accumulated darkness. "It's not attacking us directly," I said, opening my eyes, my voice strained. It's feeding off our emotions, our fear, our anger. We have to remain detached, focused solely on our training. Yuna nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. You are right. The key is control. The jade itself, it can help. She retrieved a small, intricately carved jade pendant from her pouch, a piece Shed found hidden within the Academy's foundations. This pendant, crafted by the first master of the ghost step style, is infused with calming energy. It helps to disrupt the flow of the serpent's breath. As she placed the pendant around my neck, a surge of warmth spread through my body, a subtle counterpoint to the chilling influence of the serpent's breath. The pressure on my mind lessened, replaced by a feeling of serene clarity. The jade whispers, Yuna murmured, her voice soft. It remembers the lessons of the past. It guides us to find balance. Just then, a low rumble echoed through the courtyard. A contingent of Imperial guards, led by a stern-faced captain, approached. He carried a scroll, his expression serious. Guardian of the West, he announced, bowing deeply. The Emperor has summoned you. He requests your presence at the Imperial Palace. There is a matter concerning the jade mines of the West. The last words hung in the air, laced with a subtle undercurrent of apprehension. It seemed the serpent's breath wasn't simply a threat to our immediate safety. It was a symptom of a far greater danger, one that had begun to ripple through the very foundations of the Empire. As I followed the captain out of the courtyard, under the relentless rain, I knew the reckoning had truly begun. The silence of the ghost step was about to be shattered, and the fate of the Empire, perhaps the world, rested on my ability to control the echoes of the past. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Serpent's Breath. The Imperial Palace was a beast of jade and gold, suffocatingly opulent. Servants, clad in crimson and sable, moved with a practiced efficiency that bordered on unsettling. Captain Zhao, a man carved from granite and stern resolve, led me through a maze of corridors, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his saber. The air thrummed with the suppressed energy of 1,000 rituals and the weight of centuries of imperial power. The Emperor awaits, Zhao announced, his voice a low rumble, as we paused before a massive, intricately carved door. He is impatient. The Emperor, Yongxi, sat upon a throne of polished obsidian, his face a mask of weary displeasure. His advisors, a collection of silk-robed dignitaries, shifted nervously around him. The scene felt less like a royal audience and more like a cage. Yongxi wasn't a man of grand gestures or booming pronouncements. He was a collector of anxieties, a repository of unseen burdens. He gestured for me to approach. Guardian Jian-Hwa, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. We have been observing you. Your demonstration at the Academy was remarkable. The efficiency, the precision, it defies explanation. Kaito, predictably, stood rigidly behind the throne, his face a study and barely contained fury. He hadn't dared to approach, sensing the shift in power that radiated from Jian-Hwa. The jade mines, Yongxi continued, his gaze fixed on the pendant nestled against my chest, have been experiencing disturbances, a resurgence of the serpent's breath. The tremors aren't natural. They are targeted. He outlined the situation with chilling detail. For weeks, the iron veins beneath the west mine had been fracturing, spitting out on unstable shards and triggering localized earthquakes. Worse, these weren't mere geological events. The tremors were accompanied by a strange, almost sentient distortion of the air, a cold, oppressive presence that induced panic and disorientation. The Imperial geomancers, baffled and terrified, had identified a potent, malevolent force at play. The Ronin, Yongxi said, his voice hardening. They were not simply assassins. They were conduits. Their actions, amplified by this resonance, have exacerbated the serpent's breath. He pointed to a holographic projection hovering above the throne, a swirling vortex of gray energy, radiating outwards from the heart of the west mine. It pulsed with an unnerving rhythm, a reflection of the chaotic tremors. We believe, Yangshi explained, that the ghost step style specifically is a key to understanding this phenomenon. Legend speaks of a connection between the style and the serpent's breath, a balance between stillness and motion, a conduit for manipulating the very earth. He turned his gaze to me, an intense scrutiny that felt both probing and unsettlingly familiar. We've discovered ancient texts referencing a hidden chamber beneath the West Mine, a place where the first master of the ghost step style conducted his research. It is said to hold the key to controlling, perhaps even neutralizing, the serpent's breath. Suddenly, Yuna stepped forward, a quiet resolve hardening her features. "The jade whispers," she said, her voice clear and steady. "It confirms the Emperor's suspicions. The pendant, it amplifies the resonance. It's drawing the serpent's breath to this location." As she spoke, the holographic projection shimmered violently, the swirling gray energy intensifying. A palpable chill filled the chamber, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I instinctively clutched the pendant, feeling its calming energy surge through me, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. "The chamber," Captain Zhao said, his voice tight with urgency. "It's not just a repository of knowledge. It's a nexus point. The serpent's breath feeds upon itself there. We believe it's trying to awaken something." The Emperor nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I have assembled a team of the finest warriors, the strongest geomancers, and a contingent of the Order of the Silent Blade. They will accompany you to the West Mine. You will lead them. And Guardian Jian-Hwa," he paused, his gaze piercing, "you must ensure that the echoes of the past do not consume the future." With a curt nod, he dismissed the assembly. As we turned to leave, a low, guttural chanting drifted from the depths of the palace. It was a language older than the Empire, a language that resonated with the ancient power of the ghost step style. I realized then that this wasn't just about controlling the serpent's breath. It was about confronting something far older, far darker, that lay dormant beneath the heart of China, something that had been waiting patiently for its moment to rise. And I, the unassuming stable hand, was now the only one who could stop it. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Dragon. The air in the West Mine hung thick with the scent of damp stone and something else, something acrid, like burnt ozone and ancient regret. It had been 3 days since Wed arrived, 3 days of drilling, of geomantic surveys, and of a growing sense of unease that clung to the very walls of this abandoned imperial quarry. Captain Zhao, a man built like a granite boulder and radiating bureaucratic caution, was practically vibrating with controlled anxiety. The Emperor's team, a formidable collection of warriors, the Crimson Phoenix clan's elite, the Geomancer Lai, and a dozen Silent Blade monks, were settling into a disciplined rhythm, while I, Jian-Hwa, heir to the Jian Estate, and increasingly a reluctant warrior, attempted to appear as comfortable as a man who'd just been entrusted with the fate of the Empire could met. The serpent's breath wasn't proving as chaotic as the initial reports suggested. Instead of erupting in bursts of corrosive energy, it manifested as a subtle distortion in the air, a shimmering heat haze that clung to the deepest recesses of the mine. Levi, a wizened old man with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of mountains, explained that the serpent's breath was not a mindless entity, but a concentrated echo of a powerful martial technique, the dragon's whisper used by the first emperor to seal a primordial demon. "The technique itself is a prison," he said, his voice a low rumble, "and this is the key. The serpent's breath is attempting to manipulate the residual energy, to weaken the seal, to awaken it." My unease sharpened. The ghost step style wasn't just a martial art, it was a connection to the echoes of those who'd wielded it before. I could feel the faint resonance of the dragon's whisper, a chilling rhythm that felt both ancient and dangerously seductive. "The Silent Blades are attempting to reinforce the geomantic structure," Zhao reported, his voice tight, but the energy flow is erratic. It's as if it's actively resisting their efforts. That's when the chanting began. It started subtly, a whisper on the wind, but quickly grew in intensity, echoing through the vast chambers of the mine. It was the same guttural language from the Emperor's chambers, the language of the ghost step style, but layered with something darker, something older. The air grew colder, the shimmering haze thickened, and the earth beneath our feet throbbed with a low, resonant hum. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the deepest darkness of the mine, Master Lin, the leader of the Silent Blade Order. He stood amidst a swirling vortex of gray energy, his face a mask of serene determination, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He was enacting the Dragon's Whisper, a rapid, intricate series of movements that seemed to defy gravity. A torrent of motion that felt as though it was tearing at the very fabric of reality. But this wasn't a controlled execution. Master Lin was struggling, his movements becoming increasingly frantic, his eyes glazed with a horrifying awareness. He was battling something within himself, something that was pulling at his will, amplifying the serpent's breath. "Has lost?" Levi shouted, his face grim. "The seal is failing. The serpent's breath is feeding on his power." I reacted instinctively. Years spent suppressing the instinctive surge of the ghost step style. Years of deliberately dulling the connection to the ancient warriors. Suddenly vanished. The force of the Dragon's Whisper slammed into me, overwhelming my senses, flooding me with a dizzying torrent of images, ancient battles, fallen empires, the primal scream of a trapped demon. I moved. It wasn't a conscious decision, not really. It was a release, a recognition of the power that had been dormant within me for so long. I flowed through the chaotic energy, disrupting Master Lin's movements, grounding him, severing the connection between him and the serpent's breath. The chanting abruptly ceased. The vortex of gray energy dissipated, and Master Lin collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The air stilled, the chilling hum subsided, and the serpent's breath retreated into the depths of the mine. Silence hung heavy in the chamber, broken only by my ragged breathing. I stood there, covered in sweat, the remnants of the Dragon's Whisper still clinging to me like a phantom weight. Zhao rushed to my side, his face a mask of astonishment. "By the Emperor's grace, you stopped him. You actually stopped it." The Emperor, who had been observing the events from a secure vantage point, issued a single, clipped command. "Jian-Hwa, secure the mine. Levi, analyze the geomantic flow. We have much to learn from this disaster." As I began the painstaking process of securing the mine, of identifying the precise points where the seal was weakest, I realized the truth. This wasn't about controlling the serpent's breath. It was about confronting the darkness that had been waiting, patiently, for centuries. And I, the unassuming stable hand, was now the only one who could ensure that it never rose again. Chapter 13. Echoes of the Dragons whisper the dust of the mine settled. A gritty film coating my skin and clothes. A permanent reminder of the confrontation with the serpent's breath. Li Wei, a wiry scholar with an unsettlingly focused gaze, continued his meticulous analysis of the mine's energy flow, scribbling furiously in his parchment-covered book. The geomantic readings were disturbing. The earth pulsed with a raw, malevolent energy, a discordant note within the otherwise stable rhythm of the Empire's ley lines. It felt as though the mine wasn't just a source of iron and jade, but a wound in the land itself. Zhao, ever the pragmatic strategist, was overseeing the reinforcement of the weakened seals. He barked orders with a controlled intensity, his dark eyes scanning the work of the miners, a far cry from the sycophantic reverence had shown me just days before. The experience had shifted something in him, a respect born not of fear, but of genuine acknowledgement of my power. I was restless, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by a nagging unease. The incident with Master Lin had been a revelation, a terrifying demonstration of a power I hadn't consciously understood, let alone controlled. The dragon's whisper, the raw, untamed energy of a trapped demon, had reacted to my presence, not with hostility, but with a desperate plea for release. It felt lonely. The disturbances here are concentrated around the third level, Jian-Hwa, Lai announced, his voice barely audible above the rhythmic clang of hammers and the hiss of steam from the ventilation shafts. The vibrational resonance is fractured, as if a vital cord has been deliberately broken. I followed him down the narrow shaft, the air growing colder with each step. The miners, hardened veterans used to the damp, oppressive conditions, cast nervous glances in my direction. They recognized a strange power in me now, a potent stillness that contrasted sharply with their grueling work. As we reached the third level, the source of the disturbance became chillingly clear. A deep fissure, jagged and black, spiderwebbed across the cavern floor. Within it, swirling like a miniature storm, was a pool of viscous, charcoal-gray liquid. The air thrummed with the residual energy of the serpent's breath, a faint, sickly sweetness clinging to the back of my throat. Suddenly, a voice, ancient and brittle, echoed within my mind. It wasn't spoken, but felt a torrent of sorrow, rage, and millennia of imprisonment. Release me. I instinctively braced myself, drawing upon the ghost step style, not to attack, but to shield. The familiar flow of energy began to build within me, not the chaotic torrent of the dragon's whisper, but a smoother, controlled current. I visualized a single, unbroken line, a pathway for the energy to flow, and focused my intent. The gray pool rippled violently, as if struck by an unseen hand. A tremor ran through the rock, and the air crackled with static. I could feel the creature within the pool struggling, resisting my efforts. It wasn't an act of aggression, but of desperate self-preservation. It wasn't bound by the same rules of engagement as Master Lin. This was something far older, far more primal. Then I saw it. Not a physical form, but a shimmering distortion within the pool, a fleeting glimpse of serpentine scales, of eyes burning with an ancient, cold intelligence. It was a memory, an echo of its existence before it was trapped, before the seals were erected centuries ago. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about controlling a demon. It was about understanding the tragedy of a consciousness, a being driven to madness by isolation and the crushing weight of eternity. Before I could consciously formulate a response, Commander Kaito appeared, a flicker of surprise momentarily eclipsing his usual arrogance. He had been monitoring the situation from above, alerted by Zhao. "What in the name of the ancestors?" he sputtered, drawing his jade-handled staff, a gesture I recognized as instinctive fear rather than genuine threat. "You're manipulating the flow? You're talking to it?" My attention remained fixed on the pool, on the desperate echo within. I didn't respond to Kaito. Instead, I continued to channel the energy, reinforcing the fragmented chord, smoothing the dissonance. Slowly, agonizingly, the tremors subsided. The shimmering distortion within the pool began to fade. "Jian-Hwa," Levi said, his voice filled with a hesitant reverence, "you've done something impossible. The resonance is stabilizing. The pool is calming." As the last vestiges of the serpent's breath dissipated, the fissure began to seal itself, the rock slowly knitting back together as if guided by an unseen hand. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the mine. Kaito remained frozen, his staff lowered, his face a mask of bewildered fury. He hadn't intervened. He hadn't even attempted to understand. He had simply watched, a powerless observer of something he couldn't comprehend. I turned to him, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. "Perhaps," I said, my voice low and steady, "some are born to be served, Commander. And others are born to be surprised. Chapter 14. The Echo of the Serpent. The air in the serpent's cavern hung thick with the scent of damp stone and a strange metallic tang, the residue of the serpent's breath. It clung to the rough-hewn walls, a tangible reminder the chaotic energy ID just wrestled into submission. Kaito stood a foot away, his normally impeccably groomed hair slightly disheveled, his face a study in bewildered incredulity. The staff head brandished moments before lay on the ground, its jade handle gleaming dully in the flickering torchlight. Li Wei, ever the pragmatist, was already meticulously examining the sealed fissure with a small, intricate measuring device. "The structural integrity of the cavern is remarkably intact," he announced, his voice a controlled murmur. The disruption was localized, contained almost entirely within the pool itself. A feat of geomancy I've never encountered. He glanced at me, a flicker of genuine astonishment in his eyes. "You possess a level of control over the Earth's energy that surpasses even the most seasoned masters of the 5 elements." I offered a curt nod, barely acknowledging the praise. The exhilaration of the exertion, the sheer unexpectedness of it all, still coursed through me. It wasn't the victory itself that filled me with a quiet satisfaction, but the awareness of the potential locked within the ghost step style, honed over centuries, and now capable of something far greater. "Commander," I said, my voice deliberately measured, "you witnessed a demonstration of power, an intrusion into the very fabric of reality. I trust it gave you pause for thought." Kaito remained silent, his jaw tight. He shifted his weight, a barely perceptible movement that spoke volumes about his simmering resentment. He was accustomed to being the center of attention, to commanding respect through brute force and carefully cultivated arrogance. This unsettling display of quiet mastery threatened that carefully constructed facade. "You manipulated the pool," he finally said, his voice low and strained. "You spoke to it. What was that? Some sort of illusion?" "Not an illusion, Commander," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "It was a resonance. The pool wasn't merely water, it was a conduit, a gateway to the currents of chi that flow through this land, through all things. I was simply adjusting the discordant notes." I paused, allowing the implications of my words to settle. "The serpent's breath is a dangerous force, a manifestation of chaotic energy. It seeks to disrupt, to unravel. To calm it, one must understand its language, guide its flow." I gestured towards the pool, now a still obsidian surface reflecting the torchlight. "The serpent's breath can be channeled, not just for destruction, but for preservation, for healing, for dynasty and now control. Dot." Suddenly, Yuna appeared at the entrance to the cavern, her face etched with concern. She had been waiting anxiously outside, having sensed the disturbance. "Jian-Hwa," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Are you unharmed?" The tremors were unsettling. I offered a brief smile. "I am well, Yuna. The pool is calm. I believe we've discovered a remarkable ability, one that could potentially reshape our understanding of the world." Her eyes, intelligent and perceptive, settled on Kaito. "Commander, you were observing. Did you, perhaps, detect anything unusual?" Kaito sputtered, attempting to regain his composure. I observed nothing of significance. Just a stable hand performing a bizarre experiment." He delivered the words with a palpable undercurrent of scorn. I ignored his dismissive tone. My attention was drawn to something else, something subtle. A faint shimmer, like heat rising from the stone, clung to the air near Kaito's feet. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there, a residual trace of the energy head, unwittingly absorbed. "You've touched it, Commander," I said, my voice low. Yuve felt the resonance. He stiffened, his hand instinctively moving towards the hilt of his staff. "Don't be absurd." I felt nothing. I raised a hand, and a single, perfectly formed jade pebble detached itself from a pouch at my belt. With a subtle shift of my energy, I directed it towards Kaito's foot. It struck the stone with a resounding thunk, and as it settled, the shimmering haze around his foot vanished entirely. Kaito recoiled, his face paling. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not the fear of physical combat, but a deeper, more primal fear, the fear of the unknown. The fear of power beyond his comprehension. Juve silenced it. He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I simply nodded, allowing him to confront the uncomfortable truth. Indeed, Commander. Sometimes, the greatest victory is not found in destruction, but in the quiet, unwavering control of chaos. The silence returned, heavier this time, laden with unspoken questions and a palpable shift in the balance of power. The revelation of my abilities, coupled with the chilling demonstration of Kaito's vulnerability, had fundamentally altered the landscape of the Academy, and perhaps the entire Empire. Chapter 15. The Echo of Thunder. The rain had ceased, leaving the courtyard of the Cavalry Academy slick and reflecting the pale morning light. The air, still heavy with the scent of damp earth and horseflesh, held a strange, tingling quality. Kaito, a shadow of his former arrogant self, was meticulously cleaning the saddle of a young, nervous warhorse named Azure. He moved with a deliberate slowness, avoiding eye contact with anyone, a stark contrast to the boisterous energy that had once defined him. The experience of that single, terrifying heartbeat had irrevocably fractured his spirit. I, Jian-Hwa, stood observing him from the doorway of the stables, the familiar weight of the lead rope slung across my shoulder. The transaction, the acquisition of the Academy, and the granting of the jade mines to the Yunus family had been swift, almost anticlimactic. The Emperor, a man known for his volatile temper and love of spectacle, was utterly captivated by my display of power, by the sheer, undeniable wrongness of the situation. He demanded explanations, of course, and I offered only carefully crafted justifications, focusing on the protection of the Empire and the inherent instability of unchecked ambition. Commander, I said, my voice carrying a tone of quiet authority, you continue to focus on the outward details. Mastery isn't measured by polishing a horse, it's measured by understanding the flow, the potential, the inherent resonance of the world itself. Kaito didn't respond, continuing his meticulous work. Had grown accustomed to my pronouncements, to the unsettling feeling that I saw far more than he did, that I possessed a knowledge he desperately tried to conceal. The training of a warrior, I continued, drawing a small, polished jade pebble from my sleeve, is like sculpting a mountain. You don't simply hack away at the stone, you gently coax it, understanding the forces within that shape its form. To force your will upon something with brute strength is to invite collapse, to create instability. I tossed the pebble into the mud, watching as it sank silently. You experienced that, didn't you, Commander? He finally paused, his hand still gripping the reins of Azure. He stared at the disturbed mud, his jaw clenched. It was unnerving, he admitted, his voice strained, like something shifted. I nodded, allowing him a sliver of recognition. The resonance, Commander, is a subtle thing. It exists in all things: the flow of water, the grain of wood, the heartbeat of the earth, even the force behind a warrior's strike. To perceive it is to understand the true nature of power. Suddenly, a young stable hand, a boy named Lin, rushed into the courtyard, his face flushed with excitement. Commander! The Jade Master, Master Zheng, has arrived. He requests to speak with you. Kaito visibly stiffened. Master Zheng was a revered figure in the imperial court, a renowned scholar and practitioner of ancient arts, rumored to hold forgotten secrets of the ghost step style. My family had a long-standing rivalry with Zheng's clan, stemming from a dispute over the ownership of a legendary jade vein. Send him, Kaito commanded, his voice tight. As Master Zheng, a man of severe features and piercing eyes, approached. I felt a subtle shift in the air, a strengthening of the resonance that still clung to the courtyard. It was a curious sensation, as if the very stones were holding their breath. Master Zheng bowed deeply, his respect thinly veiled. "Commander Kaito," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I have traveled far to observe your progress." He glanced pointedly at me, a flicker of suspicion in his gaze. "Progress?" Kaito scoffed. "I am simply maintaining order, Master Zheng, ensuring the discipline of these young warriors." Master Zheng ignored his dismissive tone. "The young man, Jian-Hwa, possesses a remarkable aptitude. The resonance around him is pronounced." He turned his gaze to me, his eyes narrowed. "I sense a connection, a control that exceeds mere skill. He is connected to the ghost." The word hung in the air, heavy with significance. The ghost step style, the ancient martial art that had defined my family for generations, was whispered about in hushed tones, considered a legend, a myth. To be acknowledged as a practitioner, to be described as connected to the ghost, was a declaration of profound respect and of profound danger. Before I could respond, Kaito abruptly intervened. "Silence, Master Zheng. This is a place of training, not idle speculation. The young man is merely diligent. He learns quickly, that is all." He shifted uncomfortably, his hand instinctively reaching for the hidden grip of his staff. The subtle shimmer around him intensified, a visible reaction to his unease. I smiled faintly, a gesture that did not reach my eyes. "Commander," I said, my voice soft but firm, "fear is a powerful weapon, but it is a brittle one. True mastery lies not in suppressing emotions, but in understanding them, in harnessing their energy. The resonance you sensed, Commander, is not a threat. It is an invitation." And then, without warning, the ground beneath Kaito's feet shifted, not violently, not with an earthquake, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor. The shimmering haze around his foot flared intensely, blindingly white for a fraction of a second, before fading. He stumbled, instinctively gripping his staff, his face contorted with a fear that now consumed him entirely. I raised a hand, and another jaded pebble detached itself from my pouch, striking the spot where Kaito had just stood. The haze vanished completely. The echo of thunder, silent yet potent, resonated through the courtyard. The reckoning had begun.